Hey there, friend. You found your way back to the porch. That tells me two things about you already. One, you don't value a good night's sleep near as much as you ought to. And two, you're just stubborn enough to keep listening even when you know you shouldn't. Come on in. Mind the step there. Boards are older than most of the lies in this town. Grab yourself a chair or a crate or whatever passes for comfortable these days. If you're listening on YouTube, do me that simple little favor that folks keep forgetting about. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so the porch light's always on when a new tale drifts in. If you're tuning in someplace else, swing by the channel when you get a chance and give Hollow Porch Stories a thumb and a few kind words. Costs you nothing, helps keep the lights on, and it confuses the hell out of the algorithm when you enjoy something that isn't somebody unboxing socks. All right, now, tell me something. You ever notice the same car on your street, night after night? Same make, same color, same damn spot. First couple evenings, you shrug it off. Then you start checking your blinds just to see if it's there. And once you've done that a few dozen times, you're not looking at a car anymore. You're looking at a question that doesn't want to be answered. Tonight's story is about a fellow who finally answered it. He thought he was just fed up with a stranger parking outside his house every night. Turned out, the stranger wasn't the one doing the watching. So top off your drink, friend. Pull those curtains just a little tighter, and maybe don't look outside if you hear an engine idling. This one's called, "He Parked Outside My House Every Night. I Finally Looked Inside the Car." My name's Cal. If you'd asked me 6 months ago what the scariest thing in my life was, I'd have said my credit score. Or maybe my ex-wife when she realized I'd forgotten to sign the divorce papers on page 7 again. I used to think horror was big, obvious stuff. Blood, knives, screaming. Kick the door in and you know you're in a bad situation. What nobody tells you is that the stuff that really gets in your head starts small, quiet, like a drip in the ceiling you keep meaning to fix, or a car on the curb that never leaves. The first night I noticed it, I just moved into the house on Maple Bend. Moved into makes it sound fancier than it was. The place was an aging 2-bedroom rental at the end of a cul-de-sac with a sagging porch and a yard that looked like it had been on the losing side of a weed war for 20 years. But it was cheap, and it was mine alone, which is all I wanted after the divorce. I remember standing in the living room, surrounded by boxes and the smell of dust and cheap paint, staring at the bare window. No curtains yet, no blinds, just my reflection in the glass and the little circle of light from the street lamp out front. That's when the car rolled in. Old sedan, dark blue or black, I couldn't tell in the sodium light. It creeped down the cul-de-sac like it was lost, slow enough that I set down the box I was carrying. No music, no honking, just the soft hum of an engine and the crunch of tires over gravel where the asphalt gave up trying. I figured it would turn around at the end and leave. That's what people did on this street. There was nowhere else to go unless you planned on crashing through my fence and ending up in the neighbor's azaleas. But it didn't turn. It eased over to the curb across from my house and stopped. Engine idling, headlights off. Just that dull shape of it under the street lamp. Windows dark. For a good 30 seconds, I stood there with a coffee mug in my hand that I'd forgotten to drink from, watching, waiting for the door to open. Maybe it was a neighbor coming home, or somebody who'd gotten high and missed their turn and decided my curb looked inviting. The door never opened. The car just sat there, engine humming low. After a minute, I told myself I was being weird about it and went back to unpacking. I had bigger problems than other people's parking choices, like finding my toothbrush or figuring out where the hell I'd boxed up my sheets. The second night, it was there again. I didn't see it pull up that time. I'd come back from a late shift at the warehouse, shoulders aching, brain fried from arguing with the new inventory system that absolutely did not want to acknowledge we still moved pallets by hand. I killed the engine of my own beat-up truck, Climbed down, and there it was. Same dark sedan, same spot, same dead windows. I told myself it was some neighbor's guest with a weird schedule. People worked nights, people had lives. I was just noticing it because I had nothing better to think about than why my own life had boiled down to 8-hour shifts and microwave dinners for one. I nodded at the car out of pure habit, like you do with strangers when you pass them in a hallway, and walked inside. By the 5th night, the habit had changed. I'd started checking. It snuck up on me. I'd come in, dump my keys in the little dish by the door, and before I even took off my work boots, I'd find myself sidling over to the front window and lifting the corner of the cheap blinds I'd finally bought. And there it would be, the car. Always the same, parked under the street lamp, just far enough away that I couldn't see into the windshield unless I pressed my face to the glass and made myself obvious. No headlights, no dome light, just a dark shape where nobody else on the street ever parked for longer than a minute. On the 10th night, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I wouldn't look. I came in, locked the door out of habit, marched straight to the kitchen and yanked open the fridge. Cold air, half a leftover sub, a 6-pack of cheap beer, some condiment bottles left by whoever lived here before me. I grabbed a beer, popped the top, and leaned back against the counter. I lasted 3 swallows. Then I walked to the window and checked anyway. It was there. Of course it was there. You know how people talk about a presence? I had always thought that was some dramatic ghost hunter nonsense. But there's something about knowing that just out of sight, there's a person or something sitting completely still, watching your house for no reason you can understand. It doesn't need to move. The fact that it doesn't is what gets to you. 2 weeks in, I knew the car's nightly routine better than I knew my own. It showed up sometime between 11:30 and midnight. I never caught the moment it arrived. It was just suddenly there whenever I looked after that. It stayed until around 4 a.m. Sometimes I'd wake up to pee and drift past the window like a ghost just to see. Still there. Same shadow. Same quiet hum you could almost hear if you pressed your ear to the wall. I started keeping the TV on in the background at night, even if I wasn't watching. Some old habit from childhood, when noise meant my parents were still awake and whatever noises in the hall weren't my problem. Power bill be damned. The laugh track on late-night sitcom reruns felt less insane than the thought of lying in total silence while a stranger watched my curtains. I didn't call the cops. Part of that was pride. The other part was the voice in my head that sounded a lot like my ex-wife saying, "What are you even going to tell him, Cal? Hey, some guy's parking on a public street and hasn't committed a crime yet. Can you send a SWAT team?" So I didn't call. I just watched. And the more I watched, the car became part of the house, like the water heater or the cracks in the ceiling, an unpleasant feature I complained about but did nothing to fix. The first real crack in that routine came on a Thursday. I was at work, juggling boxes on the loading dock, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from my neighbor across the cul-de-sac, a retired nurse named Linda, who'd introduced herself with a plate of cookies and a warning about raccoons getting into the trash. "You home?" the text said. I wiped my hands on my shirt and texted back, "At work? Why?" 3 little dots. Then, "There's a car outside your place again. You expecting someone?" My mouth dried. I didn't know why that hit me harder than seeing it with my own eyes. Maybe because it meant I wasn't imagining it. The car was real enough that somebody else had noticed the pattern. "Same one?" I typed. Dark sedan. No one gets out. Been there since last night. Thought it was weird. Since last night. I checked the time. 2:13 p.m. I'd left for work at 7 that morning. The car had always been gone by sunrise before, vanishing like a bad dream. This was different. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I almost told her to get the license plate, almost told her to call the cops. But instead I typed, "Probably a friend of my ex. She's weird. Thanks for checking, though." It was a stupid lie. Linda didn't know my ex, didn't know I barely had any friends. But the idea of this situation becoming official made my skin crawl. If I brought other people into it, it meant that I had to admit that I was scared of a parked car. How do you say that out loud without feeling like an idiot? That night, I came home in full daylight, for the first time in a while. Overtime had dried up, and my boss sent us all packing at 3. The street looked normal. Kids' bikes in one yard, a plastic flamingo in another, somebody's sprinkler sputtering to life and soaking a patch of already drowned grass. The curb in front of my house was empty. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing.
If you open this door, you can't pretend it's nothing anymore. If you don't, you're going to stand at that window every night for the rest of your life. I twisted the lock. Cold air slapped me in the face as soon as I opened the door. Rain blew in sideways, peppering my bare feet and soaking the threshold. I stepped out anyway, pulling the door shut behind me until the latch clicked. I didn't lock it. Some part of my brain decided that if I needed to run back inside in a hurry, I didn't want to be fumbling with keys like an idiot in a slasher movie. The street was quieter than it had any right to be. The rain swallowed most sounds, turning the world into a muffled gray tunnel. My house's porch light was off, but the neighbors' lights glowed warm and oblivious behind their curtains. Nobody else was looking outside. I walked down the short path to the sidewalk, heart thudding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Each step felt too loud, too slow, like I was walking through syrup. Up close, the car looked older than I thought. The paint was dull, but not rusty. The tires were in good shape. No dents, no bumper stickers, no parking pass hanging from the mirror. It was the most aggressively average sedan I'd ever seen. Except for the fact that it had been outside my house every night for almost a month. The engine hummed softly. I could see the faint vibration of it where the hood met the frame. My reflection swam on the driver's side window, warped by the rain and the curve of the glass. I swallowed and raised my hand. "Hey," I said, louder than I needed to. My voice sounded wrong out here, thin against the rain. No answer, no movement. I knocked on the window, 3 quick raps with my knuckles. They stung more than they should have. The silhouette in the driver's seat did not turn its head. My skin crawled. "Look, man, this is weird. You know that, right? You can't just keep parking outside my house every night. You lost? Need me to call someone? AAA? Therapist?" Nothing. The rain ran down the glass between my fingers. I suddenly wanted very badly to see the driver's face. Just to know there was a normal person attached to this, someone I could argue with or threaten or hell, even help. I cupped my hands around my eyes and leaned in, pressing my forehead lightly to the glass. Inside the car, it was dark. Not just the lights are off and it's nighttime dark. It was like the interior swallowed the street lamp instead of reflecting it. My own faint outline hovered there for a second, and then, slowly, my eyes adjusted. There was someone in the driver's seat. They were sitting exactly the way I'd imagined, facing forward, hands on the wheel, shoulders slightly hunched. But their head, it wasn't right. It was turned a little too far to the side, chin angled down like they were staring at something in their lap. No hair, no hat, just the smooth curve of a skull catching the faintest glow from somewhere I couldn't see. "Hey," I said again, softer. The word fogged the glass. "You okay?" As I watched, the driver's head twitched. Not a normal movement, not the slow turn of someone finally acknowledging another person. It was more like a puppet string had been yanked. The head jerked up, then settled. The body didn't move at all, just the neck snapping into a new position with a horrible, boneless fluidity. Now the face was turned toward me. Only I couldn't see it. Where the driver's face should have been, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, there was only shadow, a round patch of black that did not match the rest of the darkness in the car. It was thicker, denser, like a hole punched through reality and filled in with ink. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. "Jesus," I hissed. The engine never changed pitch. The car never rocked, but the shape in the driver's seat stayed angled toward me now. That round absence where a face should be aimed directly at my chest. "You should go inside," the sensible part of my brain whispered. Another part, the same one that kept me checking the window every night, leaned forward instead. I took a few careful steps along the curb, moving toward the front of the car. The face followed, turning in series of tiny wrong jerks to keep me centered. It felt more like a camera auto-tracking a subject. My hand brushed the hood. It was warm. The rain hissed on the metal, steaming faintly. "Who are you?" I asked. The thing in the driver's seat did not answer, but something else did. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound made me jump. I fumbled it out with wet fingers, nearly dropping it in the gutter. The screen lit my face with that familiar, sickly blue, unknown number. I glanced at the car, then swiped to answer. "Hello?" Static. Not the kind you get when your buddy drops his phone between the couch cushions. This was a low, dense hiss that hit me right in the center of my skull, like someone had poured television snow directly into my brain. I pulled the phone away, wincing. "Hello? Who is this?" Under the static, something moved. A shape of sound trying to form words. "Cal?" My name. Clear for just a second, before the hiss swallowed it again. My throat got dry. "Who is this?" I repeated, louder. The shadow where the driver's face should be tilted slightly, as if in curiosity.
You finally came outside? The voice was wrong. Not too deep or too high, not obviously mechanical, just layered, like 2 or 3 voices were speaking at once, but never quite in sync. Under it all, the static kept whispering, scratching at the edges of my hearing. "I'm calling the cops," I said. It came out shakier than I wanted. "You invited me." My grip tightened on the phone. Rain pattered on the screen, tiny dots of cold. "I did not," I snapped. "I hadn't. I was sure I hadn't." Silence. Then a soft chuckle that didn't fit in my ear. It felt like it was happening just behind me instead, warm breath on the back of my neck. "Every night, you look, you open the blinds, you watch, you keep me." My mind flashed back to all the evenings I'd stood there in the dark, fingers parting the blinds, eyes locked on this exact spot. "I didn't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask me to leave." My free hand curled into a fist before I realized I was...
The door eased open with a long, rubbery sigh, like it hadn't moved in years and was disappointed to be doing it now. I couldn't move. It wasn't fear, not exactly. Fear would have made sense. This felt more like when you're half awake in a nightmare, watching something terrible coming toward you in slow motion, while your body lies there, unwilling to cooperate. Rain blew into the gap, mist in the interior. The darkness inside didn't thin. If anything, it seemed thicker, like the rain itself refused to cross that line. "Okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. "Okay, that's enough." The door stopped halfway open, just hanging there, like it was waiting for me to make the next move. A normal person would have turned around and gone back inside, locked every bolt, called the police, and tried to explain why they'd waited this long to do so. I stepped closer to the open door. The air coming out of the car felt wrong. Not cold exactly, not hot, just stale, like the inside of an unplugged freezer that had been shut for years. My breath fogged in front of my face, even though I knew it wasn't nearly cold enough outside for that. From here, I could see more of the driver. They were wearing a shirt, something plain and dark with a collar. Their hands were still on the wheel, fingers long and narrow, skin pale in the stray light from the street lamp. Their nails were clean, no scars, no jewelry, and that face, that absence, was even worse up close. Up close, it wasn't just a void. There was movement, tiny shifting ripples in the blackness, like TV static without the white. If I stared too long, I got the same headache I used to get if I sat too close to the television as a kid. A thick, pulsing ache right between my eyes. "I'm not getting in," I said. The thing in the driver's seat tilted that smooth, featureless head a few degrees to the side, like a dog hearing an unfamiliar sound. "Nobody asked you to," it said. The voice wasn't coming from my phone this time. It wasn't coming from the car speakers either. It just existed, right there in the open space between us, vibrating in my bones. "You opened the door," I said. "You opened it," it said. "Every time you looked out, every time you thought about coming out here, I'm just following through." The backseat shapes flickered again. one of them pressed closer to the middle, its edges sharpening. For a fraction of a second, I could see details, a faint outline of hair, the suggestion of the cheekbone, and the hollow where an eye should be. And then it blurred back into the general mass of darkness. "What are they?" I asked before I could stop myself. The driver's head twitched, that too smooth movement again. "Passengers," it said. "People you picked up? People who got tired of standing at their windows, of pretending they weren't waiting for something. People who got in." The rain seemed louder now, beating a frantic rhythm on the roof of the car and the street around us. It was starting to pool around my shoes, creeping into my socks again. "You said you wanted help. This doesn't look like help. You don't know what help looks like from here. You only know what it feels like in there." It flicked one finger off the steering wheel, pointing, just barely, at my house. "In there, it's quiet," it went on. "You turn up the television. You leave texts from your ex-wife unread. You eat alone, sleep alone. You look out and hope something is watching back. That's why you didn't call the police. You were afraid they'd tell me to stop. You don't want me to stop." "I do," I said quickly. Too quickly. The thing in the driver's seat gave a small, soundless laugh. I felt it more than heard it, like a ripple in the air. "You were disappointed when I wasn't here," it said. "You tried to pretend you weren't, but you checked anyway." My throat tightened. I remembered the empty curb, the hollow drop in my stomach when I saw nothing there, the stupid, aimless way I drifted around the house afterwards, not sure what to do with myself. "I didn't ask for you," I insisted. The driver's hands tightened just slightly on the wheel. The leather creaked. "Maybe not with words," it said, "but want is loud, Cal. It shines, and you burn like a porch light nobody ever visits." My jaw clenched. "Then why my house? Why this street? Why me?" For the first time since I'd come outside, the driver looked away. The head turned, not toward the windshield, but toward the passenger seat, like it was listening to something only it could hear. "This street," it murmured, "this street knows me. Old habits, old roots. They thought I'd stop coming once they grew up and moved away." "Who?" I asked. The head turned back toward me. I had the intense, irrational feeling that if there had been eyes in that blank, crawling dark, they would have been staring directly into mine. "You don't really think you're the first person to live in that house?" A shiver that had nothing to do with the rain ran up my spine. "I rent," I said. "People come and go. That's normal." "Is it?" the thing said. "Ask Linda in the morning. Ask her how many times she's watched me park here. Ask her how many different silhouettes she's seen standing at that window." I shook my head, trying to dislodge the image that wanted to form. A parade of strangers, blurred by memory, parting the same cheap blinds I'd installed. All of them staring at this same spot in the street. All of them convinced they were the only ones. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. The driver's hands tightened just slightly on the wheel. The leather creaked. "Want is your word," it said. "I run routes. I take people where they're already going. You were headed here long before I arrived, Cal. I'm just transportation." The back seat shapes leaned forward in unison. A low murmur rose from them, like wind through dead leaves. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence felt familiar. Regret, resentment, longing. In the farthest corner of my mind, where denial lives, a thought tried to surface. Ask it where here is. My mouth was too dry to say it out loud. Instead, I heard myself ask, "What happens if I get in the car?" The driver's hands relaxed again, settling back into their original position. When it spoke, the static in the voice had softened, almost soothing. "You stop standing at the window," it said. "You stop wondering if anyone sees you. You stop wondering if tonight is the night something changes. You stop being unfinished." I let out a shaky breath. "And then what?" I said. "Then you ride," it said, simply. "Ride where?" "Forward," it said. "Away. Out of this little loop you've worn in your life." Thunder rolled again, closer this time. The clouds overhead flashed dimly. My skin prickled with static that had nothing to do with the voice. "And if I don't?" I asked. It didn't hesitate. "Then you close the door," it said. "You go back inside. You keep checking the blinds. For a while you tell yourself you're done. You pull them closed all the way. You block me out with excuses," and it shifted slightly. The hand closest to me lifted from the wheel and rested on the open door, fingers tapping once, twice against the metal. "But the longer you stand at that window," it went on, "the more you join us. There's only so much staring you can do before the glass starts to stare back. One way or another, Cal, you'll end up looking from this side." One of the shapes in the back seat pressed closer to the window. For a heartbeat, the rain formed a veil over it, distorting its outline just enough that I could see a detail my brain refused to accept. The curve of its shoulders, the tilt of its head, the way its hands rested on its knees. It looked like me. I stumbled back again, heart slamming against my ribs hard enough that my chest hurt. "Stop," I said. "Just stop. This is some kind of pattern," it interrupted. "That's all. You know how many times people on this street have said that."
For a heartbeat, I could have sworn there were two of me in the glass. One with my tired, ordinary face, and one standing just a half step behind my shoulder, a little taller, a little thinner, its head tilted like it was trying to see over me into the room. I didn't turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed to, but some older, deeper part of me, the part that remembers looking away from the closet door when you were a kid, froze me in place. I just stared at the screen, at those two shapes sharing the same body. The lights in the house dimmed just a fraction, like the whole place had taken a breath in and forgotten how to let it go. My reflection's eyes blinked once. The one behind me didn't. The static that wasn't there a second ago bled slowly back into the black glass, a gray snowstorm blooming around our faces, swallowing us grain by grain. The more it grew, the less I could pick out where I ended and it began. "Not real," I said, or thought I did. My lips moved in the reflection, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was a low, broken buzz, like a voice woven out of radio stations between channels. The me in the glass smiled. I did not. I felt my cheeks stretching anyway, muscles pulling against my will, that borrowed grin climbing up my face like fingers hooking into skin from the inside. The thing behind me in the reflection leaned closer, the suggestion of long arms draping over my shoulders like it had been there the whole time, just waiting for me to finally notice. The room around me faded to a smur. The only thing clear in the world was that screen and the face inside it pretending to be mine. Been a long time, the buzz said through my teeth, through its teeth, through the static. We left you on this channel a long, long time. Memories I didn't own flickered at the edge of my vision. Other living rooms, other couches, all other poor fools sitting where I stood now, all of them leaning in, all of them saying the same thing I had said. I'll just watch one more minute. The thing's fingers tightened on my shoulders in the glass, and I felt it real then. A weight like cold wire sinking through my shirt, pressing down to the bone. No, I managed, jaw shaking against that alien smile. You're just noise. The static crackled, flared, and for a moment there were dozens of faces in it, all lead, all half-formed, every one of them mouthing different words that blended into a single, awful whisper. We're what's left when the show is over, it said. We're what keeps playing when you turn the sound down. The house creaked around us, a slow, aching sound, as if the beams themselves were listening. The porch I'd grown to love as my quiet little escape felt very, very far away, like it belonged to another life. I forced my hands to move. They felt like they were underwater, every motion thick and delayed. But inch by inch, my fingers found the sides of the TV, the rough plastic warm from a light that wasn't really on. Then show's done, I said. And this time the voice sounded like me again, thin and hoarse, but mine. The faces in the static rippled like something had thrown a stone into a black and white pond. For the first time, the thing behind me in the reflection reacted. It twitched, head jerking in a way that didn't belong to anything with bones. You can't turn us off, it crackled. You invited us in. You watched. Yeah, I said. I also paid a bill. And before it could answer, before that awful grin could settle back over my mouth, I did the stupidest, bravest thing I ever done. I pulled. Not the plug, the TV. I ripped the whole box off the stand. It was heavier than I looked. Old glass and older guts, the cord snapping free from the wall with a bright, angry spark. For a second, the room went blind. No light porch, no hallway lamp. Just the afterimage of the screen burned into my eyes. Behind that ghost image, in that soundless dark, something howled like a radio losing every station at once. I stumbled backward, dragging the TV with me, my shoulder slamming into the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. The thing in the screen was thrashing now, a smear of too long limbs and too many joints trying to claw its way through, the static boiling under the glass. Somehow, I got the deadbolt turned. Somehow, I got the door open. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and for the first time in weeks, the cul-de-sac looked like what it was supposed to be, just a strip of cracked asphalt under a tired sky. I dragged that screaming, flickering box out onto the porch. The second its weight crossed the threshold, the sound changed. The howl folded in on itself, dropping an octave, then another, until it was nothing but a deep, grinding roar like a storm locked inside a jar. The static in the glass went from white to a dirty, oil-slick gray. Not your room anymore. Not your house, I panted. The thing in the screen pressed itself against the glass one last time, every line of its body wrong in a way that made my eyes water. Up close, it wasn't a single shape at all. It was 100 overlapping silhouettes. Every person who'd ever sat too close, watched too long, stayed up one night past when they should have gone to bed. I didn't give myself time to think.
There's no concrete bird bath at the edge of my yard, cracked down one side from a winter before I moved in. I hauled the TV over to it, muscles screaming, the cord dragging behind like a tail. The thing inside must have realized what was happening because the screen began to flash, faces, channels, colors that had never existed on any broadcast, all strobing so hard I thought it might split my skull. Last chance, it hissed, voiceless stacked on voices. You can show you everything, every ending, every secret. You never have to sit alone again. My hand shook. They really did. But I thought about my porch. I thought about quiet nights that belonged to me and the crickets and the wind and nothing else. I thought about every time I'd turn the volume up just to drown out the way my own thoughts sounded in an empty house. No more reruns, I said, and I dropped it. The TV hit the concrete with a crunch like bone and glass breaking together. The screen spiderwebbed, then exploded outward in a shower of black shards and dead dust. For one impossible second, the static kept going. Hanging there, mid-air above the busted shell, a swirling, furious storm with no screen to hold it. Then it collapsed in on itself, with the sound like a breath being taken away. Silence. Real silence. No hiss under the fridge, no wrong tone in the hum of the house, just the wind moving through the trees and the faint buzz of a streetlight somewhere down the road. I stood there on the porch, chest heaving, the dark pressing in soft and honest around me. From somewhere deep in the wreckage at my feet, a tiny red standby light blinked once, feebly, and went out. That was it. Back in the house, the living room felt smaller without the TV, like a stage after they've struck the main prop. The empty rectangle of dust on the stand looked ridiculous, almost embarrassing, like a tan line on bare skin. I swept up the glass, bandaged the cuts I didn't realize I'd gotten, and sat on the porch with a mug of coffee that went cold before I finished it. Out here, the only static is the sound of leaves rubbing against each other and the occasional passing car. Out here, when something moves at the edge of your vision, you can turn your head and see it for what it is. Sometimes, late, when the moon's just right and the cul-de-sac is as quiet as a photograph, I catch myself listening for that old familiar hiss. I never hear it, but every now and then, if I stare too long at the blank window where the TV used to shine, I see a pale shimmer in the glass, like a channel trying to tune itself in from very, very far away. That's when I turn off the porch light, go back inside, and let the dark be dark again. Because some shows don't get a second season, and some things should stay in the static.